Welcome to Rescue Paws Stories, your go-to place for heartwarming and emotional humans and animals stories. The light of the early morning sun slipped gently through the tall pine trees, bathing the quiet grounds of the countryside animal rehabilitation center in a soft golden hue. And within the modest, aging building at the end of the lane lay an old German shepherd named Rex, once hailed as one of the finest police dogs in the city. Now just a shadow of his former self, curled up on a thin blanket, eyes dulled by time and loss, ears barely twitching at passing sounds, limbs stiff with the ache of age and old injuries. And though he had once charged into fire, sniffed out danger, and leapt between bullets and his handler without hesitation, those memories were buried somewhere beneath a fog of pain, confusion, and a strange, heavy sadness. But far away in the city, someone hadn't forgotten him. Officer Jake Thompson, now retired himself, sat in his small apartment, staring at a worn-out photograph. A young, eager police officer, kneeling beside a proud, alert Rex, both of them covered in mud after a grueling search and rescue operation. And as Jake traced the edges of the photo with calloused fingers, his heart ached with memories that came rushing in like a flood. Nights spent on patrol under stormy skies, heart-pounding chases through alleyways, moments of laughter during training, and the unspeakable bond he had shared with Rex, a bond that had been ripped apart by bureaucracy and cruel fate after the warehouse explosion that left Rex injured and unfit for service. Jake had fought to keep him, begged the department to let him adopt Rex, but policies had prevented it, and the two had been forced apart. Rex sent to a rehabilitation program, then shuffled between care facilities and eventually forgotten by most, except Jake, who had never stopped wondering, never stopped aching inside. And then one night, while watching a local news segment about underfunded animal shelters, he saw a flash of familiar eyes in the background, behind rusted kennel bars, and something inside him cracked open. It was Rex, older, slower, but unmistakably him. And Jake knew he had to find him, no matter what it took. So he made the calls, pulled strings, drove across counties, until he arrived at the center and stood frozen outside Rex's kennel, heart in his throat, 1,000 memories colliding in his chest as he whispered, "Rex, hey buddy, it's me," hoping, praying for even a flicker of recognition. But the old dog lifted his head slowly, blinked once, and then turned away, curling back into the corner like Jake was just another stranger passing through. And that moment, that quiet rejection, felt like a bullet to the soul. Jake returned the next day and the next, each time bringing something from the past. Rex's old leash, his K9 unit badge, the rubber ball he used to chase, like his life depended on it. Even Jake's uniform shirt, still smelling faintly of sweat and old times. But Rex remained distant, unresponsive, as if the bond they had shared had been erased by time and trauma. The staff at the center told Jake not to get his hopes up, that memory loss in dogs, especially ones who had suffered injuries, was real and painful. But Jake refused to give up, not after everything they had been through. He began reading their old mission logs aloud, recounting every adventure they'd had, every criminal they'd caught, every life they'd saved together, his voice trembling with emotion as he sat beside Rex's kennel for hours on end. And slowly, something began to change. A flicker in Rex's eyes, a twitch of his ears when Jake whistled the tune he used to hum on late-night patrols. But still no recognition, no spark, until one stormy evening, when thunder rolled across the hills and the power flickered out briefly, plunging the center into darkness. Jake, holding a flashlight, rummaged through his bag and pulled out the small, scratched K9 badge Rex had worn his entire career, still faintly etched with his ID number, and gently hung it on the kennel's latch. Then whispered, barely above the sound of rain, "You earned this, partner. I never stopped being proud of you." And something in those words, maybe the tone, maybe the truth, reached into Rex's mind like a key unlocking a long-closed door. He stood slowly, shakily, and walked to the gate, sniffed the badge, then looked up at Jake. And this time, his gaze didn't pass through him, but locked on him, wide-eyed and trembling, and his tail, dormant for so long, began to wag slowly, then faster, and then Rex let out a low, aching whimper that grew into a bark, not one of alarm, but recognition, of joy, of memory crashing back all at once. And he leapt against the gate with what little strength he had left, licking Jake's fingers through the bars, pressing his head into his hand, whining and crying and barking all at once. And Jake fell to his knees, sobbing, clutching his best friend, both of them overcome, surrounded by shelter workers who watched in stunned silence, wiping their own tears away as years of separation melted in that one miraculous moment. And just when it seemed like the most beautiful part of the story had unfolded, fate took another turn. As a young boy visiting the center with his mother began to convulse, collapsing to the ground in a seizure. And while panic erupted, people yelling for help, dialing 911. It was Rex, old, frail, but driven by instinct and training, who broke open the gate in a burst of adrenaline, trotted straight to the boy, and nudged him gently onto his side, licking his face, using the very maneuver he had been trained to use during field rescues, keeping the boy's airway open, calming his spasms with soft pressure and presence. And by the time paramedics arrived, the boy was stable, and the once-forgotten dog was hailed as a hero all over again. The story went viral overnight. Retired police dog saves child, during tearful reunion with former officer, and the world fell in love with Rex. But for Jake, none of that mattered. What mattered was that his best friend remembered him, that the bond they had shared had survived even the silence of years. The department officially granted Jake full adoption, and they brought Rex home together, to a small house with a big yard and a warm fire where they spent their remaining years in peace, walking together every morning, sitting on the porch every night. And whenever people asked about Rex, the hero, the savior, the miracle dog, Jake would smile quietly and say, "He saved me first," because the truth was, love like theirs didn't fade with time. It only waited to be remembered.